How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scarlet, and welcome back to a brand new video, guys. Now, today we got some things to talk about, which you guys may have already seen. For example, there has been speculation about a Pokemon Presents coming now in August, because it's the 1st of August when I'm posting this, and the talks are about it being next week on the 8th of August, which would be on a Tuesday, which is perfectly lined up with being a week from now, which could be a date they could do it on. Normally, they don't really do it on those days, on Tuesdays, I would say, but they can do it literally any time during the week. Nonetheless, though, what are we talking about? Basically, absolutely tweeted Pokemon Presents PMEX spoiler. That is Pokemon Masters EX, which is a mobile game, and Nemona is being added. Now, here's an explanation from Centro. It says, explanation. Usually, the first character of a new generation in Masters is released earlier along all updates. However, Nemona releases suspiciously late at the time Pokemon Presents normally take place. And then there's also this post right here where the data mine happened, where they specifically said it's happening from Pokemon Masters EX data mine, Pokemon Presents coming August 8th. And here it literally says, campaign Pokemon Presents. Now, it doesn't actually say a lot of other stuff. It just says start date, which I'm assuming that translates over to around when we should be expecting it to happen, which is the release of Nemona, which is on the 8th of August. So basically, we have more or less a confirmation that a Pokemon Presents is coming. But that's not all, though. We also have information from VGC, which is a Video Games Chronicle website. Basically, they said Nintendo's next-gen console is planned for the second half of 2024. Dev kits are already in the hands of key partner studios. Now, dev kits are basically the development versions of a console. So think a dev kit of a Switch was probably given to companies that were making games for the Switch way ahead of time before the actual console was announced. And this is done so those companies can actually make video games for the console, because the console will be running its own operating system. Think of like how, the PlayStation, the Xbox, they function differently, and they're, if you're going to be a developer for those, you need to have something to make the game on so they can actually test it. And that's what the dev kits are basically. They're already out there. Somebody already has their hands on it so they can actually create whatever it is that they're going to be creating for this new console. But this is not all, though. A thought from Centro is that due to this likely next year's Pokemon game will be the final $60 Pokemon game, and that is starting with Generation 10 in 2025. The games will cost $70. This won't mean a considerable increase in quality. And this is just a standard thing around the world right now. Everything is increasing in price, especially games have gone up from their usual $60 to $70 range now. Some places will still keep them lower, some countries will keep them lower, some stores will keep them lower, unless the overall MSRP, which is like the just a standard kind of price from the companies themselves that when they put it out there into the world, unless they decide to kind of intentionally force companies to increase that pricing, which I don't really know, because that all depends on what all the profit margins and shit on that. But basically, we can expect that to happen. But also, we can expect that, yes, we will be receiving a Pokemon game next year, because they've been releasing Pokemon games non-stop since 2016, I think. They haven't missed a single year. Every single year there's been a new Pokemon game, right? I can list them all out to you really quickly, right? 2016, if I remember correctly, was Pokemon, let me think. So 2015, there was no game. And then 2016 was Sun and Moon, 2017 was Ultra Sun and Moon, 2018 was Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, 2019 was Sword and Shield, 2020 was Sword and Shield DLC, so Crown Tundra and Isle of Armor, 2021, if I remember correctly, unless my brain is making me mistaken here, was Pokemon BDSP, and then 2022 was both Legends Arceus in that same year and Scarlet and Violet. And then 2023, this year, is going to, of course, be the DLC for Scarlet and Violet. There's been always a game release. And of course, you can say the DLC isn't a game, but it technically is, because it just replaces the third version games. This is literally something officially said by the Pokemon Company and Game Freak, that the DLC are basically just a replacement for the third versions. So we pretty much know that whatever we get next year will probably be the final one priced at this range, but also that we will be getting another game next year on the Switch, regular Switch. And because of what's being said here, the second half of 2024, which means, after summer of next year, that's when we should be expecting to see the continuation of this information and the release of this thing, because it's planned for then. So we'll see what happens with that. Either way, though, this is all just a little bit of speculation right now. We have a bunch of other stuff to talk about. Of course, there's a bunch of different posts. Here, for example, some further info on that Switch, which is release aim for 2024, LCD display, a cartridge, so not OLED, cartridge slot, supports portable mode, and backwards compatibility remains unclear and has not yet been confirmed, which I really hope it is backwards compatible so that people don't have to go buy a Switch to play some of the Pokemon games or some of the Nintendo games, from the Switch. So then you have to have both consoles. That would just be annoying, and I don't think that's really cool, but it's Nintendo. They can do whatever they want, right? They can totally do whatever they want. But they do tend to have some level of like relative backwards compatibility, at least with the first iterations of a new console, right? Unless it's a full leap. So for example, if you look at the Game Boy ones, I think the initial, like, if you had a Game Boy, if I remember correctly, if you had like a regular Game Boy Advance, like the original one, you were actually still able to play some of the color games and just the original Game Boy games. And then when the Game Boy Advance came out, like they kind of, you know, you could still play them, right? You could still keep playing the old Game Boy games. And that kept going until the DS came out. That's when that stopped, but it didn't really, because the first Nintendo DS actually had a GBA slot as well, where you could put in your Game Boy games. So technically, that was backwards compatible for the first generation of Nintendo DSs, but then that stopped as well. So I do think initially it will, and then it will kind of be phased out as they do other iterations. Like when they do the Switch 2 OLED version or the Switch 2 Pro version, whatever you want to call it, when that happens, that's not going to exist anymore. They're going to remove, you know, like little small things. But that's just some of the stuff, though. We have, of course, other things to talk about as well. First of all, the fact of the fact that there's going to be a Pokemon Presents next week. It would be on the 8th. Of course, it hasn't been announced yet. Normally, if it was going to happen this week, it would have been announced by now. But if it's happening next week, it can be announced literally on Friday. It can be announced at any given point. So basically, we're just now on that like waiting period. We're just literally waiting for something to happen. And honestly, we'll see what goes with that. Soul Silver said the following: now that Pokemon Presents is all but confirmed, I want to hear all your thoughts on what we think. He says, I've seen a few people suggest this, and while it could be completely unprecedented, I can't really count it out as a possibility. What if the Presents next week, the Pokemon Company Incorporated announced the DLC 1, the Teal Mask, will release the following week after Worlds? People are throwing around the idea that could be a shadow drop in the Presents. I think that it would be literally impossible, as it would take focus and viewership away from Worlds, which is an event they have been hyping up. But if we follow the same idea, releasing it right after Worlds would keep the Pokemon hype at a high. It's really just a fun copium dream, though. In my opinion, the earliest it would drop is September 1st, which, yes, I agree, that's the earliest possible time. The most realistic time this could drop is going to be, I mean, let's think about it. If it doesn't drop in September, it's gonna drop in October, okay? Just guaranteed, because they want to release both of these DLC within this year. And how many months do you have left? You have all of August, September, October, November, December. That's 5 months of time, and I'm pretty sure they don't want to release them back to back. I mean, even BDSP and Legends Arceus, which pretty much released back to back, still had a give or take month and a half, almost 2 months between each other to kind of let each other like simmer out. So like the first, game, BDSP, came out in November, but then you had all of like, half of November, all of December, and majority, I would say, of January as well. So almost 2.5 months between them. So if you do the DLC, the most logical would be September, October. I would say October personally. I think that's when it's going to happen. October, it gets released, right? Then you have November, and at the end of December, not maybe like New Year's or whatever, but sometime in December, you release the other one, right? And boom, there you go. You have yourself both of them released, and you're Gucci for the time being, until, of course, Pokemon Day, where you're going to be announcing, new stuff next year. So we'll have to wait and see if anything happens from that. I don't really know if it will, but let's talk about some of the other stuff. For example, we have some theories about Ogre Pawn, which is, of course, one of the new Pokemon. I also think I just got logged out of Twitter for some reason. No idea why that happened, but either way, did you know that Ogre Pawn and the Ogre Mountain, which seems to be the flag and symbol of Kitakami, is in the Teal Mask DLC, is based off of an Oni Island from the Tale of Momotaro. Now, Momotaro is this whole story about this little guy who goes around with a bunch of animals doing stuff. Either way, Oni Island seems to be very well known and has been seen in modern Japanese media, like Okami and One Piece 2. It's odd that Game Freak made it into a mountain here, but I guess they had to change it up a bit. So basically, you can see right there, mountain, Monster Mountain, same thing here. So clearly, they're basing the story on this Momotaro character, which gives us a lot of hints as to what could happen. But either way, he says here, another fun fact is that the Oni that Momotaro and the three friends face are a band of Oni, with one Oni leader, but are sometimes depicted as a red two-horned and a blue Oni with one horn, which are usually very similar to the two other unrelated Pokemon, Sock and Throw. The number of horns might even relate to the mountain having two horns, but one is broken. Maybe Sock and Throw will be part of Ogre Pawn's band of Oni in the Teal Mask too. Also, it's interesting to note that if they follow this depiction of the Oni Ogre Pawn, which has two horns, so what about the one horn Oni and a new separate form of a Pokemon? So could there be another form of Ogre Pawn? We don't really know. We do know there is a bunch of Pokemon that need to be actually revealed. This is the stuff we already know so far, right? So we know that within the Teal Mask, and if I'm going to just, try to make this a little bit smaller for you guys here, you can see all of it. Basically, what we know is this, right? We know that for the Teal Mask, we have what we think is like a new regional fake coughing and wheezing. That could change. There's been talks about that being something else. A possible new form of a Pokemon. Right now it's speculated to be a Lycanroc Dawn form. And then of course we have Monkey Dory, Okidogi, Pheasantipede, and Ogre Pawn as well, right? So that's a total of, what does that put us on? Like 1, 2, 3, it's about 7 of them there. And then of course you have the Indigo Disc, which I think this image over here doesn't actually include something, which is, I would say is like maybe the paradoxes, but over here they include the paradoxes, which is like, for example, Iron Entei and past, I guess, future and past, versions of Terrakion and Entei, which I think have been rumored. Something called Takenoko, which is over, like, I don't know exactly what that is, just a weird thing sticking out of the ground. Terrapagos, and of course, the baby version of Terrapagos. Now again, we don't really know what this all means, but we'll have to wait and see if anything else develops from that. Of course, it is a bit weird, though, that we haven't got an announcement, as what Soul says here. Slightly concerning that there was no announcement for Pokemon Presents that is supposedly a week from today. Sure, they could announce it up to the day before it happens, but a week before is usually a checkpoint. I'm not doubting it yet, but I was expecting something today or tomorrow. And we did have an hour ago. The Festival of Masks sure looks like it'll be a fun time. But again, I don't really think this is anything to stress about. Keep in mind, things can happen at any given time. Just literally, it's been confirmed. Like, I think this pretty much confirms it here. The fact that it says campaign_Pokemon Presents, that is scheduled as an ID for like literally a piece of code within the game of Pokemon Masters, pretty much confirms it. So I'm not really stressed about if or not it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just a little bit annoying to wait for it. But nonetheless, though, it's just that, it's just one of the small things. One of the small things we have to deal with. Nothing to stress about too much. Either way, though, let's continue on to the next thing, which of course is going to be about some of the other theories we have right now. So for example, here you have Light, another one of these leak analysts, and he basically said the following, which is, the Pokemon Company like to hide hints for the next gen. So here I'll leave you a huge one. The most unnoticed location where it is only found 2 ingredients in all of Paldea, an Easter egg to the next generation. It's 2 beloved ingredients that are part of the Italian flag, basil and tomato. See you in generation 10. And here he shows, well, yeah, I guess tomatoes and basil, I guess, fair enough, which is random, very specific. And we do know that they like to leave hints behind. They love to do that. That is just very, very true. And here it says, since the Unova myth is similar to the myth of the founding of Rome, I would propose that the unusual theory that next Black and White has been transformed into the Italian peninsula. That would be an interesting twist if they were to do that. That would be so weird, though. They used like the Black and White story or Unova, whatever, and applied it to Italy. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Personally, I would be against it. But Soul Silver had something to say, which is, this is one of those we never know until Generation 10 actually is revealed. Kind of post, so naturally it feels a bit crazy. At the same time, it could be real. So I'll add something that I found and have been saving, lol. Who's to say this guy isn't a Generation 10 hint to a food culture cooking region like Italy? We have ample evidence that Game Freak leaves hints to the coming next generation games hidden within the current generation games. The problem is we don't know what to look for, so could be totally looking in the wrong place. I'm Italian though, so I'll support an Italy region at all costs. Fair enough. Well, I don't know if that's going to happen. It's been a lot of Europe lately, so I don't know. We'll see, man. But the fact that they're giving us Kitakami and basically they're giving us a bit of Japan in the DLC does feel like an odd way of being like, yeah, we're not going to do any more Japan stuff. This is what you get and this is it. Which is really like, oh, I hope that's not the case, but anything is possible, man. That's the crazy part. Anything is possible in this world and anything could happen. But basically what we're dealing with right now is we're waiting for the Pokemon Presents to get announced. We don't really have much else, and that's pretty much it for today, guys. So hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out and bye-bye.